About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's go, let's be free with Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Good evening, everyone. It's Jim here at Tutor Chew. A warm welcome to the latest. It's our second, isn't it? Our second study live stream for this term for AQA A-level psychology students. And joining us hot foot from teaching, literally arriving within seconds of this live stream starting, we've got Lara in the middle and Laura on the right. So two familiar faces. Good evening, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
Two happy faces, and I'm not surprised you're happy because it's another issues and debates session tonight. And is that right? I think it's good to be happy about issues and debates, isn't it? It's and we did it was a wonderful session last week, our first one on the nature nurture debate, and we've had over 700 students attend live or watch on catch up just in the first week on this regular slot on a Tuesday at 5:30. It is Tuesday, isn't it? It is 5:30. That's right. So
doesn't feel like a Tuesday.
It's been a long day. So welcome. If you're joining us live, it's fantastic to see us. I can see that lots and lots of students joining us live, which is fantastic. You get a chance to have a go at the activities. We've got about 30 minutes or so, maybe just less, on culture bias tonight. One of issues and debates. Type your answers, as always, into the live chat window and impress Lara and Laura with your psychology expertise. If you're watching on catch-up or replay, which is most people, by the time we've got close to the exams, then you can't use the live chat, but please do pause the video. Maybe if you're working in a class group, have a think about the answer and then start the video and see how you got on. I'll post a link at the end to the live download that you'll be able to go to download all tonight's slides and watch a replay of the session. So don't worry about writing everything down, because Lara and Laura will pick out some of the key content and put it on screen. But don't worry, don't Don't feel you're under pressure to write it all down. You better download the slides. Enough of me. Are we ready to start, Lara and Laura? What do we think?
Yes, I think we're ready. Are we ready, Laura?
Yeah, let's go. We're making it harder this week, remember? I think it was a bit easy last week.
You were right.
We're making it harder this time.
We are making it harder. Last week we thought it was hard, but actually the answers were just so good. So we've set the bar. Yeah, good point. Okay, let's have a go.
All right, so beginning, guys. Well, you have 2 minutes to answer these questions. This is called 3, 2, 1, and I'll explain why when we reveal the questions on the next slide. So for the first question, you need to identify 3 types of culture bias for me. Number 2, you need to give me 2 key terms that are quoted in the specification for culture bias. And 1, you need to give me the term of this definition. So the belief that all humans are alike, so what is true for one person is true for another is called what? So when you type your answers, if you just put the number 3 and then give the 3 answers, number 2, give you 2 answers, 1, and give your answer. Have a go. We'll see what you guys come up with. You've got 2 minutes starting now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Excellent. Well, firstly, well done, Tara. You got in there first, then following Jasmine and Mercy. Yeah, I can tell you've all got the first one correct, those 3 types of culture bias. We've got there ethnocentrism, alpha and beta. Well done. Pippa, you've put for 3 universality, beta and alpha. Now, I can tell you, Pippa, you've got 2 of those correct, but universality is an answer, but not for number 3. So ethnocentrism, can anybody actually give me the definition for ethnocentrism? And this is a really important one to define, and we're going to find out why on some of the other questions. Yeah, well done, Holly. Number 1 is universality. Well done. Can anybody define ethnocentrism for me, though? Really important one to be able to define. What does that mean? Have a go at typing your answers in the chat box. What is ethnocentrism? So Jasmine, implying your own culture's norms onto another culture. Yeah. Holly, judging other cultures by the standard of our own. Very good. Like this wording so far, guys. Yeah, so ethnocentrism, well done. It's kind of seeing things from your own cultural viewpoint as normal. And if other cultures kind of differ from that, maybe seeing them as a bit kind of atypical, if you like. Yeah, we've got some other definitions coming. Will. Yep, good. Tara, again. Yeah, excellent, Toby. When a study is carried out only using participants from one culture. Yeah, but then it's about, seeing your culture as the norm as a result, those findings from that study. And And Mercy, well done again. So alpha and beta, if we just have a little chat there, I'm just going to talk you through the differences. But again, just to say, alpha and beta bias for culture isn't in the spec wording, but it is required more so for gender bias. So I think that's something to keep in mind. But let's go through alpha and beta bias for culture anyway. So alpha is the assumption that there are cultural differences between groups, whereas beta, kind of similar with gender, is a minimization. So minimization of differences between cultural groups. So assuming everyone's the same. So a bit like our example with IQ tests. I'm not going to talk too much about an IQ test because I think we might have some good examples later on about IQ tests. So let's go over to number 2. I didn't see any responses for number 2, but we've already mentioned ethnocentrism, and we've already defined that. Can anybody tell me what cultural relativism means? What does that mean? And that, as it says here, these are the 2 terms that are quoted in the spec. What does that mean for you guys in terms of the exam? They can ask you specific questions on either or of these terms. So it's very important to be able to define these and also apply them as well to topic areas. So any answers? What is cultural relativism then? What answers are we going to have here? Cultural relativism. Or any examples even, if we can think of any examples of how to apply the term. Holly, well done. So norms and values can only be understood within specific social and cultural contexts. I like that. Tara, not judging a culture as they're all different. Yeah. Yeah, Will, that's fine. There's probably going to be some overlap, but this is for AQA specifically. But again, there is going to be an overlap. So cultural relativism, some really good answers there. So the idea is studying behaviour in the context of their own social norms and customs, if you like. And Heidi, we've got when behaviours and values are understood in their own culture, no judging, really good. And Licia, something could be considered abnormal in one culture, but in another, it could be considered as normal since they have different beliefs. Yeah, different beliefs, norms, values, yeah, customs. Yeah, perfect, excellent. Let's go on to the last one then, number 1. I can't remember who it was now, I have to scroll back, but someone did get this. Was it Holly? Yeah, it was Holly. Universality, excellent. So the belief that all humans are alike, so what is true for one person is true for another, is universality. And by the way, this is a term that is also in the spec wording. So again, if this is something that you're not too familiar with, get familiar with it, because this is something that they can question you on as well. Okay, guys, really impressed with those answers. You've done really, really well. I'm going to pass you over to Laura now for the next few slides.
Thanks, Laura. So just to pick up on what Will said about OCR, there is definitely overlap. And one of the things that's really good about issues and debates, no matter what specification you're doing, is that this is what's going to make your evaluation better. So it's one of the issues and debates topics, culture bias. That's why we're doing it today. And it isn't until paper 3 in your second year for those that are doing AQA. But it's really important that you know some of it in year 1 or for any other specification. Because if you're going to do something like evaluate Milgram, which is in social influence paper 1, year 1, or something in your optional paper 3 in year 2, it's the same type of stuff that you would use. So this is one of the issues and debates following on from last week. Culture bias, you won't get a specific question on it until paper 3, but that doesn't mean that you can't use that knowledge and skill all the way through your first 2 years. How will it be assessed? Same way anything else is really on your exam. So you're going to have multiple choice questions. We've got those applications to assess your AO2, and you could have a combination of short questions or even essay questions. Now, if you might be thinking, God, if I get a 16-mark question on this, I'll cry. But actually, once you go through it and once you've picked up good examples of research all the way through your topics, it's not a bad one to do, and that's why it's really useful throughout your whole A level. So I'll give you a bit more information on what to look out for if we can move on. So things to be aware of going forwards, whether you've done this and you're revising it or whether you're just approaching it this year, is to make sure that you are clear on those terms. I mean, we've already had several terms there: universality, relativism. I know we're going to introduce other things like ethic, emic. They all start to sound really bizarre, like another language, but actually you can't not use them when you do culture. So definitely maybe keep some type of glossary, which you can get off our website as well, but definitely something to bear in mind. We'll also chat today about the implication of culture bias. Why is it such an issue if things are culture bias? Why does it matter so much if we're influenced by our own culture? So we're going to have a good look at why that is such a negative thing to happen sometimes. And of course, you can apply all of this to topics that you've done, such as attachment, which we'll mention in a second, obedience, anything all the way up to your optional paper like gender, schizophrenia, your approaches, definitely, not just studies, theories, approaches, absolutely everything. So that's why I don't shy away from topics like this on issues and debates. Really try and use them as a tool for any subject that you're doing, any topic in psychology. Let's go on then to have a look at some of the key things that you'll come across. So we've mentioned these terms already: ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. And the one thing I want to draw your attention to right now is that actually cultural relativism is a good thing. If you believe that actually every culture is different, every culture's got its own set of norms and values and expectations for behaviour, that's the way it should be. Where it becomes a problem and we slip into culture bias is when you assume things are universal. So, for example, let me think of something here. So when you look at obedience, it is quite culturally relative obedience, depending on what your social norms are, what your government is like, what your law is like. Obedience is different. But if we assume that it's the same as what it is in the UK, everywhere else, no matter where we get on a plane and go to, that's when we get into culture bias territory. And the reason why that happens is ethnocentrism. So even though these are two separate terms, they tell the same story, which is, if you're going to do research, then you need to adapt it to whatever culture it is you're looking at. If you see things through your own cultural lens, the way that you've been raised, the Western standards of what things should be like, you will get it wrong. And we'll make some really bad decisions about other places. Now, where can we use this? Let's have a look next into some specific topics. So you could use this in psychopathology. If you think about mental health conditions, all sorts of statistics available to show you that diagnosis is different in different cultures. We overdiagnose some things in other cultures and underdiagnose in others. So it's an absolute mess when you think about the culture bias of psychopathology. In terms of obedience, like I've just mentioned about Milgram's study, and there's a classic example of where you don't have to wait till paper 3 to talk about culture bias. You can actually talk about it in paper 1 to challenge Milgram's study, to challenge Ash's study as well. You could definitely use it in attachment, Tara, you're right. So with attachment, if you've done Mary Ainsworth in the Strange Situation, what you should be thinking of, we've got an American female's idea of what attachment is. And that tool has been taken to Germany, to China, to Japan, but not changed. So we're ending up saying German kids have got attachment issues when actually they haven't. That's just the product of measuring it with an American tool. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Can you apply some of these things in sociology? You can. I know you can. I've taught sociology as well, so I know you can use some of your knowledge in from psychology into sociology. Not the other way around, unfortunately, but you can definitely use this to criticise some of that research you come across. And gender's another example. To be honest, I could go on, but I think I best pass you back to Laura before I get on my high horse a little bit further. So Laura, over to you.
We're going to give it all away, Laura. Okay, so we're going to do the bubble quiz next. We did this last week, but for those of you that are new this evening, questions going to come up, and the number of answers that are correct can range from 0, and it could be all 4 as well. So let's go over to the first question. So first one is culture bias in paper 1 examples are what? So in other words, where might we be able to apply culture bias here? So just type the letters in, guys, to the correct answer. So A, B, C, D. Again, it could be none, it could be 1, it could be all of them. So have a think. In paper 1, where might we be able to utilise and use culture bias? Okay, good. So we've got some answers. Jasmine, you're saying B. Yeah, B. And we've got D there as well from Reese. Tara, you're saying all of them. B, D, B, C, all four. B, C, and D. A, B, and C. Yeah, we've got a bit of variety here, haven't we, guys? Mostly we've got it right, actually. So let's have a little look at the answers. So we've got A, B, and D. I think we've already kind of spoken about the attachment application here. We can also use it for social influence for conformity as well. If you can apply it, who said C? Holly, you said C. Mercy, you said C, and Tara as well. Did you maybe want to elaborate and say how you might apply it to the learning theory? If you can explain that. Tutor to you, of course you think it's A, B, D. I think tutor to you are cheating though, don't you? We've already got the answers up. So yeah, it is those three, A, B, and D. Again, if you can elaborate and explain how you might be able to apply culture bias to the learning theory, then of course that's fine. And it's really about evidence to suggest that it's not a universal theory that can be applied to both, if you like, individualistic collectivist cultures worldwide. So there's definitely an argument for culture bias and attachment, definitely with the strange situations we've just spoken about. And we've even got a specific study for that, Van Eijendorn and Kroonenberg. Bowlby's monotropic theory and conformity as well is not necessarily the same in all cultures in terms of the percentage of conformity rates. Let's move on to number 2 then. So ways of conducting research into culture. So how do we investigate kind of differences in cultures? How do we actually conduct research into this? So again, it could be all of them, could be one, could even be none. So again, type your answers in to the chat box there when you think you've got it. And again, some of these terms that you're seeing on the board here, these are really important terms to know for culture bias. They're not quoting the spec wording, but it'd be disadvantageous to not be knowledgeable about these and utilize them, whether that be in AO1 or in an AO3 sense. So we've got B and D, Jasmine. So emic and cross-cultural. We've got A and B from Tara. Yeah, Holly, you're right there. Probably, yeah, but we're not necessarily asking for the right way to research culture. We're asking for, ways of conducting research. So, yeah, a lot of you are saying kind of B and A. Some of you are saying D. Any other answers? Anybody else want to have a go? Excellent. Mina, Elisa, B and D, we're saying. Good. So none of us, I don't think any of us have said C so far, which is actually a really good thing because actually C is not the correct answer. So if we reveal those answers, yeah. So if we just go through this, can anybody tell me how to define either etic or emic approaches? Does anybody know the difference between the two? So cross-cultural research is studying many different cultures to identify variations, okay? But what's the difference between etic and emic? Can anyone define that? Either or a difference? And hopefully we're thinking about our answers here or typing them away. So emic and etic approaches. So Holly, we've got etic, it's when it's carried out in one culture, then applied wrongly to others. Mina, emic is only focusing on one culture and using those findings in only that one culture, not generalizing to other cultures. Yeah, it's out of the two. Emic is kind of the one where we might potentially be able to minimize culture bias. Etic maybe not so. Etic is looking at behaviors outside of culture and emic is inside the culture. Yeah, okay, so defining etic, and some of you may have come across this term in specifically attachment when it comes to the strange situation. You may have heard of imposed etic. So that's a type of ethic. Imposed ethic is where we impose, usually it tends to be kind of a Western method or tool, measuring tool, on a non-Western culture or culture where it might not mean the same thing. So that would be a really good example of the strange situation that has been done. And we know that from the studies in attachment. So ethic is, we look at cross cultures to discover elements of behaviour that might be universal, whereas emic is a study on a culture in order to discover culture-specific behaviours. And usually with an emic approach, we are encouraging, if you like, indigenous researchers to study their own group. And that is kind of a way, if you like, to be a bit more culturally relative and minimise that culture bias, if you like. So again, maybe a couple of terms we need to go back over and revise: the emic and etic approach to studying research into culture. So Rees, you said I went for C, why is it wrong? So collectivist is a culture, so collectivist versus individualistic, but it's not a way of conducting research. So emic, etic and cross-cultural are ways of conducting research into culture differences, if you like, but C is just a type of big umbrella term, if you like, for a type of culture. Okay. All right, let's move on to number 3. Ways to overcome culture bias. And I might have given this away slightly in the previous one, but let's see what you guys come up with. Yeah, Tara, sorry, you said cross-cultural. Yes, so cross-cultural is studying many different cultures to identify the variations that are there. Okay. Yeah, Will, maybe Laura will be able to elaborate that for you in a moment, whether emic and etica and OCR. If you've never heard of them and you've covered this already, then perhaps not, but you might want to just double check that. So Jasmine, you're saying A and B. Excellent. Alicia, you're saying A. Any other answers? Holly, A and B. Yeah, I think you guys have cottoned on, haven't you? I gave it away on the last one, didn't I? I should have been a bit more careful. Yeah, so if we reveal those 2 answers, really good. Well done, guys. So emic and culturally relative. So we know the definition for culturally relative. It's the consideration of behaviour, again, of the individual within their culture before you make any judgments. And emic, we know, obviously, is studying a culture in order to discover culture-specific behaviours. And the way we might do that is, like I said, have indigenous researchers studying their own group from within, if you like. Okay, good. Well done, guys. Let's go on to number 4. So, which ones are the negative implications of conducting culture bias research? So, any negative implications here from conducting culture bias research? Again, it can be none of them, it can be one of them, or it can be all of them. What are our thoughts? Type your answers in the chat box. Mina, in there first. A, B, C and D. We're going for all of them. Same with Jasmine. Excellent. Any other answers? Any different answers? We're saying A, B, C and D as well. Heidi, Holly, you're thinking maybe all, perhaps. Amir, all as well. Alicia, we're saying B, C and D, not A. All. Yeah, so if we reveal the answers, actually all of these potentially could be a negative implication, a negative outcome, if you like, of conducting culture bias research. And I think if you've come across any examples that you've covered within your definitions, so ethnocentrism, you'll realise that actually it can create stereotypes, can neglect certain minority groups as well, create discrimination and prejudices. So yeah, you're right in all of that, guys. Full house. Well done. Yeah, excellent, Will. Let's hand you back over then to Laura for the next few slides, and then later on we're going to be looking at a few exam questions.
Thank you very much. I've calmed down a little bit now. Always gets me riled talking about culture and gender bias. Okay, so to answer Will's question before, etic and emic are named on your specification, which means that they can't ask you specific questions on it for OCR, but probably still a good practice to know, because you do have to know some issues and debates. And like someone said before, you can use all of this stuff to evaluate everything else anyway. So that's your question. Let's have a little look at some negative implications then. So I said before that culture bias is something that is a problem, but you got to understand why it's such an issue, why we go on about it so much. So have a look at this study. This is real. The US Army devised and used an IQ test before World War One. The IQ test was given to white Americans and African Americans. Can you think of any negative implications of ethnocentrism here? If you can, put it in the chat. Any particular issues you can see with that? Now, we're not given much information, but I can tell you that we're given enough to have some negative implications. Okay, we've got a mention of stereotypes and discrimination from Mercy. Very good. Let's see what everybody else thinks as well. Alessia thinks the IQ test was devised in the US and then used to test African Americans. Yeah, true. But that's kind of what I've already said. So try and think about why it's an issue. It can label the whole culture of having a low IQ, says Tarek. There's cultural differences to consider, says Heidi. I think we're all getting the gist, really, but you're absolutely right. So why is this an issue? Because using IQ tests is flawed anyway, but it becomes a problem for culture bias when we take an IQ test that's been made by one culture and we use it to measure the intelligence of people who aren't in that culture. Things that you might have to change, language, what is defined as intelligence. One thing you could probably do in class is have a look at what does intelligence mean across the world. It means pretty different things depending who you ask. And the negative implication here is that we might even say African Americans have got lower intelligence than white Americans. And if you think about putting that on the newspaper, the front page of the newspaper in your area, and you can imagine the outrage that would cause, then that's why it's a negative implication. Let's have a look at something else that you could use to show that. Oh yeah, sorry, I've just given you the answers. So the test showed that African Americans are at the bottom, and this had a negative effect. And everything that you said in the chat is absolutely right. So well done. Here's something else that you can consider going forward. So in a 1998 review of European textbooks on social psychology, something that is on your spec, Smith and Bond, two researchers, found how many studies do you think they found that were conducted in America? Put it in the chat. In all the books that they've looked at, what percentage do you think had studies in that were only conducted in America? Give it to me in percentage. So we're going to have a quick game of higher and lower, but how many were done in America? 98%, says Jasmine. Okay, that's higher. Let's see what anybody else thinks. 85, 78, we're going down a bit. Aaliyah thinks it's 95 as well. Okay. Maybe my frustration at culture bias is rubbing off, because the actual answer is 66. Now you might be thinking, what you're on about, that's not that bad. But actually, if you think about it, we're talking textbooks on psychology, a whole topic, and 66, the majority are done in America. That's an issue. That's a big issue. How many do you think were done in Europe? Do you think it's higher or lower? Put in the chat quickly. So Europe's a bit more broader. How do you think 69? Let's reveal that answer. Jasmine's gone all the way down to 29, and it's 32, so much lower, which leaves, for our last one, outside of the US or Europe. And actually, if you can do the maths here, we can just reveal the answer for this one, then it actually is only 2%. So that means the majority of things that we typically read in our textbooks are done in America. And that's an issue, because what we're saying is that basically most things that we've learned about the human mind and behaviour is actually based on American research, American participants. So we call into question that quite a bit, and that's why you can use culture bias in every topic. Let's hand you back over to Laura.
Okay, so I'm going to give you one exam question and Laura's going to do the second one. So if you have a read of this STEM, guys, you then have to reference the STEM, explain ethnocentrism and cultural relativism for 4 marks. And really what I want to know from you guys once you've read the STEM is, how would we reference the STEM with regards to ethnocentrism there? What would be our kind of STEM link? And what would be our STEM link with regards to cultural relativism? So if you type your answers, just put cultural relativism, That would be the STEM link, and then ethnocentrism, and then what you think the STEM link would be. So where might we think there's an example of ethnocentrism here? Yeah, good, Jasmine. So you've put ignored mental disorders that are found mainly or exclusively in non-American cultures. Good. Yeah, really good, Tara. You've got the same STEM link there. Perfect, well done. Excellent. Anyone for cultural relativism? Is there any kind of indicator of a little bit of cultural relativism in the STEM there? So let's go to the next slide, see that STEM link. Yeah, well done, Jasmine. So cultural relativism, short appendix and culture-bound syndromes. Yeah, acknowledged it. Yeah, so I think really good. So STEM link here, we've just got the highlight here for ethnocentrism. So with regards to this 4 marker, what you'd be expected to do here, although it's asking for reference to the STEM, it's asking you to explain the terms as well. So you would need to explain ethnocentrism, then link it to the STEM in that way in the highlighted section. With cultural relativism, if we go to the next slide, okay, it's not perfect. Okay, the fact that they've said short appendix is not perfect, but they have tried to put some culture-bound syndromes found in other parts of the world into the DSM. However, we could still argue that that's still a minority there, and it's still quite ethnocentric as a tool for measuring mental health. Okay, so we do need to recognise that as well. But that'd be your 2 STEM links there. So again, just to reiterate, you would be required to explain the 2 terms. You'd then be required to obviously link the STEM by probably quoting it as you've seen in the highlighted section there. Perfect, excellent. Okay, let's move on to the second question then, over to Laura.
Thanks. So this is just one more exam question. To answer your question though, Jasmine, is there a DSM for other countries? It's not called DSM, but yeah, there is. You'll find that most countries have got their own version, and that is another issue for culture bias. It means we're all measuring mental health with a different way of measuring mental health. So really good question there. Discuss cultural bias in psychology. I'm not going to ask you to answer this, but what I'm going to do is ask you to look at the screen. If we go to the next slide, some of this information you could use as AO1 for description, AO3 for evaluation, but just to make it a bit harder to finish us off, I've got some stuff there that you wouldn't put in an essay like this. So tricky, but 60 seconds starting now to see what you can categorise under each one. Okay, well done. So we saw some answers come through, but I'm going to put you out your misery and reveal the answer now. So for AO1, we would put the definition there. We can distinguish between relativism and ethnocentrism, and you can use some examples from the spec, whether you're asked to or not. There's some of the evaluation points we mentioned today, and all the other things, they're not for culture bias, but they are stuff that you'll come across in other types of issues and debates as well. Well done. So you could take that forward and use that as some type of essay plan. if you ever have to answer this. But of course, you'd have to put a bit more AO3 in there. So I'm going to pass you back to Laura just to finish us off for the session.
So exam gold, why have we called this exam gold? Because it really is. What you really want to be utilising with issues and debates, it's not just culture bias, is going back through your topics and really thinking, where can I apply these issues and debates? The reason why that's an exam gold is because instead of learning specific evaluation just for that topic that you're evaluating, you can almost recycle, I like to call it, recycle issues and debates into loads and loads of AO3 across all of your papers in the topics. And that means you don't need to learn as much new information. So really think about how you justify using culture bias across paper 1, 2 and 3 topics. So go back over, have a look at your AO3 that you've done, see if you can apply it. In terms of additional support, have a look on Tutor2U. There's a full range of resources. You've got exam busters there. You've got knowledge books. And obviously you've got this to look back on and revise from this topic blast here that we're doing. You can, of course, scan the QR code to take you directly to that site. That is it for our culture bias evening. I nearly forgot what we were doing there.
I think it was culture bias, Laura.
I think so.
Well, I know it was because I was having a look at the questions. There was a delay on my stream. I was typing answers my answers in about half a minute after you'd revealed the questions. I think it was an issue with YouTube.
That old chestnut.
Yeah, all right. Don't know if I believe.
Fantastic session. Awesome.
Yeah, that was
So
really good.
yeah.
Again,
And
good
great
answers.
responses, great questions as well, follow-up questions. So our live student audience, as last week, even though we raised the bar yet again, have covered themselves in glory. I'm not sure what we're going to do next week, Lara, or what do we think? I mean, do we just give up and do something really easy, or should we do some biopsych?
I think we do biopsych next week. Yeah, definitely. Let's raise the bar even higher.
Fantastic. Yeah. A massive thanks to Lara and Laura, because they've had a long day today, and I know they were literally logging in at the end of some commitments, some teaching and stuff. So that means the world to us to have this kind of fantastic live stream support and tuition. If you found the session useful live or on catch up, give us a thumbs up on YouTube. That really makes Lara and Laura particularly happy. If you didn't find the session useful at all, just give us a thumbs up on YouTube, and that'll make us happy. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because we're adding in more sessions both this term and obviously beyond. You'll get a notification as soon as those get set up. I'll post a link into the comments box on YouTube to where you can find tonight's slides, tutor2u.net/live, basically, and go to the psychology section, where you can revisit not only this session and last week, but all the other sessions that Lara and Laura and Anne and the team have done this year. Some fantastic stuff if you want to do some extra revision ahead of some mocks or some assessments coming up. I think that's about it for now. So it's our regular get together on a Tuesday at 5:30. So next week, I think it's biopsychology. I need to check.
Yeah, it's biopsychology next week. Yeah.
So be ready for that, and we'll see you again this time next week. Huge thanks from us all. So see you later.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
guys. Next week.